have to forgive me for not wearing a tie tonight. It's in our area here, it has been hotter than the surface of the sun, and so I have been not feeling well, and I've got to do something to try to keep myself a little cooler. So it is not that I do not find my classes to be unimportant. I find my class to be very important to me and to you, and so it's not that I don't take these things seriously. However, I've got to stay just a little cooler tonight, so please forgive me if my attire is not quite to your standards. If you would go with us tonight, we are going to read to start with the chapter as is our usual practice, and then we will discuss the chapter at length. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits, and he set it up in the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. When Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together princes and governors, and captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces, to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and the rulers of the provinces were gathered together into the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. They stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald cried aloud, "To you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at the time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psalmistry, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, that ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And whosoever falleth not down and worship shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Therefore at that time when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psalmistry, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. They spake and said unto the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that should hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psalmistry, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whosoever falleth not down and worshipeth, he should be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I set up? Now if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psalmistry, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made, well. But if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said unto the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thy hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times than it was wont to be heated. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. When these men were bound in their coats, their hosens, and their hats, and their other garments, and were cast in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's command was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, was astounded, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? And they answered unto the king, True, O king. And he answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near unto the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake, and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth in the midst came forth of the midst of the fire. And the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was an hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire passed upon them. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered them, and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and they changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies that they may not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that shall deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Up on the screen I had, this is a modern day photograph. As you can see, there's soldiers from the Iraqi war walking around. This is in the province of Kirkuk, if I'm pronouncing that right. I may not. I'm trying to pronounce things correctly. This is where modern day Baghdad is. And you can see here is Kirkuk. And here is the Kirkuk oil field, where that pit that you just saw a moment ago actually is. They say that that fire has been burning for over 2,000 years. The name of that place is called Baba Gurgur, and being translated from Kurdish, this is an area where the Kurds live, the Father of the Eternal Fiery. "40 meters in diameter, and they say it's been burning for 2,500 years. Thought that was rather interesting when I found that. Don't you? Now, I'm not suggesting by any stretch of imagination this is the place. There are those that believe that we are talking about today in the Scriptures. What I am suggesting, though, is this. This is not the only place that's like that in the world. This is one of several that burns like this. You know, we have some in the United States. There's a coal fire that's been burning underground for over 100 years in Pennsylvania. Natural gas leaks up out of the ground. Iraq has the greatest oil reserves in the world. That natural gas leaks up out of the ground, and once it lights on fire, it'll burn forever until they do something with it. And that's what we're seeing here. So it's not too far-fetched for us to think about in any time, today or 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, someone to build some type of a structure or something of that nature, contain some of that, and to funnel that into some type of furnace, is it? Actually, it makes kind of sense, doesn't it? There's other ways they could do it. They had oil that just leaks out onto the ground. They could take the oil out and do the same thing with it. And there's lots of different ways they can make furnaces, and did make furnaces back in those days. This is just one of them. Like I said, I am not suggesting this is that place. Wouldn't suggest that at all. I just want you to know those kind of places exist, and those that say that this type of event could not have happened are not living in reality. These kind of things could happen and did happen, and this is an actual event. All right, as we go through the chapter, as we begin the chapter, one of the first things that comes to a lot of people's mind is, where was who? Where was Daniel? I don't know. I don't know why that's got to be the first question, but that's the first question. Seems to have to be answered. Okay? How do I get rid of that?
At the end of
There.
chapter 2, it says he remained in the royal court.
And I think that's an excellent point. In my mind, I think that is probably the main point. I think that Daniel has so made himself so useful to the king that the king does not want him to leave the city of Babylon. And I think that's probably where Daniel is at this point in time. But that's just my guess. Who knows what, some people said that the king sent him off on official business. I can guess from now till forever, but the point of the matter is we don't know. He might be with the king right here and not required to bow, because the king has so much confidence in Daniel, and after chapter 2, he's not requiring Daniel to do this sort of thing. I do not know the answer, and it doesn't matter. The point of this chapter is about these three men and what was required of everyone else. That is the point of this chapter.
The answer that is logical, if you're talking about, is I don't know. But for some reason, I don't know, it's human nature, that we don't like to say, I don't know. Which all reminds me that some years ago, I mean, now 30 or more, I was involved with a lawsuit over a fire truck accident. Details don't make any difference, but the lawyer for the fire department had a little gathering with the affected personnel, and he said, in essence, we're going to have a deposition,
slip you made there, where is David? That's as good a question as where's Daniel? Why does it matter? I mean, we could have asked, where's anybody? I mean, if God, it's like people saying, when was Jesus' birthday? What's the day? Well, if it mattered, God would have told us. And so, where's Daniel? Is one of those questions that it's a foolish question, because God said Daniel's not a part of this story at this particular time. So
Yeah, there are points that matter in this chapter, but that ain't one of them. I'm sorry, that is not one of them. Caught myself. Okay. All right. So as we start the chapter, we're talking about these three individuals, and we're talking about Nebuchadnezzar, and that is our four major individuals that we will be talking about: Nebuchadnezzar, and Azariah, Hananiah, and Mishael, the three Hebrew youths. I like to call them by their Hebrew names because that's what they are. But in the Babylonian record, they're going to be called by their pagan or their Babylonian names. Okay. So in verse 1, the stage is set. Nebuchadnezzar does what? He builds a big image. Where at? Okay, it's in the province of Babylon, but it's in the plain of Dura. And so everyone wants to know, where's the plain of Dura? Once again, I'm going to tell you what. I don't know. Now there are some commentators and historians that think that this is north of Babylon, and that could well be. But it seems to me that everyone, because I've begun to look at a lot of maps, everywhere around Babylon is flat. The city. I mean, it's real flat. I mean, flat as a flitter flat until you get a little ways away from it, and then you get into some real mountainous country, and it's quite lovely actually. But then it gets mountainous then. So there's a lot of plain, and I don't know that anyone is really any archaeologist. I'll get it out yet. Just stick with me. I'll eventually get there. Any archaeologists have dug up any information that tells us exactly where it's at yet. Okay, but that's not really the point. The point that we really need to understand is it's outside of the city itself. It's someplace else. How far away, I don't know. Okay, when we get to verse 2, we see some repetitive language. What do we see? What is important for us to understand about that repetitive language? What is trying to be driven into us? Okay, there's important people there, right? So what do you think Nebuchadnezzar is trying to do? I'm really important to you, right? Don't we see all those pictures of everyone sticking their hand inside their shirt or coat? Isn't that the way it always is? Anyway, I don't know if they did that back then or not. Probably not. But anyway, he is really showing himself to be important. And he is making certain that everyone under his power knows how powerful he is, isn't he? That's the whole point of this, right?
Do you suppose that might be derived from the dream that Daniel interpreted, that Nebuchadnezzar was...
I was just about to get there. Thank you for bringing that up. That was, great minds thinking the same thing. marvelous. I love that. I love when that happens. And that's exactly where we're going to get to. A lot of people think that. If you look at the dimensions of what was set up, the dimensions support exactly what you were talking about, that perhaps it was that image that Nebuchadnezzar had seen in his dream, and again, the time frame, maybe it was shortly thereafter that dream, and it makes a lot of sense. But again, what's the answer to that question? I don't know. But it does kind of make sense, doesn't it? Here, Nebuchadnezzar has had this dream that shook him to his core. Somebody's told him something that has literally read his mind, but he still hadn't quite got the point yet, has he? Now he's gone out and built this image to show how powerful and great he is over all of the people that he's conquered. But that was part of what the image told him too, that here God had given him all this power. So all of that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Now whether that's what happened or not, I don't know, but it does kind of make sense. But I'm going to tell you, I don't know.
It shows a big difference between how God saw Nebuchadnezzar and how Nebuchadnezzar saw Nebuchadnezzar.
At least at this point, yeah.
God saw Nebuchadnezzar, at best, the golden head of a statue. Nebuchadnezzar saw himself as the entire gold statue, an entire statue made of gold. And God, it seems to me like if he got the point the first time, which he obviously didn't, making an image of self in that image would have been the worst thing he could do, because he was told that as the head he would be taken over by another kingdom, that another kingdom was going to come after the golden head. And so if he ignored that, or if he intermingled it, or however he did it, he obviously made an entire statue of gold, which means this statue is going to stand forever. There's nothing going to conquer this statue of gold. But it shows there's a big difference in how God saw him and how he saw himself.
And it also shows that he didn't get the point at the end of the last chapter that there is one God. And that was one of the points that Daniel was trying to make to him, is there is one God, and he is going to he's going to raise up these kingdoms, and God has set you up over this kingdom, and he's going to raise up other kingdoms, and eventually he's going to set up his own kingdom. He didn't get that point, did he? That there is one God. He's still this polytheist who thinks that he can look at other gods and treat each god as if they're the only God when he talks to that one God. Okay? He's still in that mindset. Now God's going to shake him out of that mindset, and hopefully for good, but I don't know. Again, I can't tell you for sure that he did or not. I'm going to have to tell you, when we get to that point, I'm going to tell you I don't know, but I hope so. But as I hope for all men. But nonetheless, he didn't get to that point. So now he erects his own God, as all men erects their own gods, don't they? Well, whether it's politics, whether it's going out hunting, whether it's your toys in your backyard, whatever it be, whether it be your own children. And I know a lot of families that make children the children they have, their gods. They will do anything for their children. And we love our kids. It's not about, when I say that, it's not about loving our kids. That's part of the problem we have in our nation today, is children haven't been given boundaries. They haven't been taught boundaries. They haven't been taught respect for authority. And we're seeing the repercussions of everything, just love of the 70s And now there's no respect for anything now, today, and we're reaping that. We're reaping that whirlwind. And people don't understand that that started way back in the 70s, 60s and 70s, and now we're reaping that. And we're going to continue to reap it for a long time until we learn the lessons that we have to learn. That God's way and the family is the only way that it'll ever work. Nebuchadnezzar didn't learn. See, I got 5 minutes, right? Okay. All right. So he does all of this, and then verse 4, he sets up a herald to tell everybody to do what? Fall down and worship. Okay. So now he reverts back to the same type of behavior that we saw in the last chapter. He goes back to what? Threats. You will do what I tell you to because I am the king. And if you won't do it, then I'll kill you. Right? Yeah, in a fairly painful way. Yeah. This is not going to be a lot of fun for you. You know, it's all right. So most people just, okay, you know, he's not he's in one of these. Nebuchadnezzar is one of these moods today, so we're just going to do whatever he tells us to, right? How many Jewish boys caved into this threat? I don't know. Again, I don't know, but I bet you there was a bunch of them. Because we only read about these 3 standing up and telling the king.
3 were brought to his.
And we're going to talk about what their motive was too, because their motive is pretty obvious, isn't it? Their motive is real obvious. Okay, so there. In verse 8, Chaldeans come forward. And what do we talked about these individuals, these Chaldeans. Again, it's not used in the term of the tribe of Chaldeans. This is used as the wise men, these types of individuals that was the king's wise men, right? Okay, so they in verse 8 come and they accuse. We see this term now that it's not those captives of that was used in the first 2 chapters. Now this term that is often we see as derogatory, and what term is that? Those Jews. Okay, yeah, we're going to go a little further with it, but I want you to understand that sometimes in the beginning, that terminology, those Jews, was a derogatory kind of a term. And that's the way they're using it here. Those Jews that you put into over us that we don't like, we didn't like to begin with, okay, they won't do what you told them to do. All right.
Let me go back just a moment, if you will. In the 7th verse,
Mm-hmm.
it says that all the peoples, nations, and men of every language fell down and worshiped the golden image
Mm-hmm.
that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. What does that tell you about all the Jews, with the exception of these 3 that we know about? It suggests that all of them fell out in lockstep, except these 3. Does it not? Seems to.
Well, there's a representation of all of these. I don't want you to get to a thought that everybody under the sun that served Nebuchadnezzar's, that was under Nebuchadnezzar's rule was there. But there's a representation of everyone under Nebuchadnezzar's rule was there, is what is being suggested here. Okay, so I believe there's individuals from Egypt, as far away as Egypt, and that's a long ways away right now. There's peoples from Syria, there's peoples from Media, there's peoples from Ethiopia, there's people, you understand what I'm saying here? There's from every place that Nebuchadnezzar has power over, those peoples and the languages that they speak are now represented. And so if they didn't speak the Syrian tongue or Aramaic, they had to be it was translated to them, and that's part of the reason why they used the music. Now, when everyone hears music, like just playing the trumpet, blowing the trumpet when you have a bunch of soldiers, when they hear that sound, when they heard that particular sound of the trumpet, then all the soldiers know exactly what move they're supposed to make, right? That's when the foot soldiers go forward, or that's when the cavalry moves forward, or whatever. See, that type of thing, you know, a trumpet or a particular sound that's blasted, that's been used in warfare for years, right? Well, we're seeing that this exact same thing here. People may not use the right, spoke the same language as the king, but he didn't have to tell them all bow down, because they've already been told in whatever language they spoke, when you hear this music, now you bow down. My time is up. Thank you very much, and we will start in verse 12 next week.